Thank you. So I want to start out by thanking the Pacific Council for putting together what I know is going to be a phenomenal conference today on water issues. And I also want to thank UCLA for hosting this and echo what Mark said, that UCLA has a phenomenal faculty working on a variety of water issues, both at a local level and at a global level. So there is nothing more important in the world than water. We can't survive without water. And as already been mentioned, almost a billion people around the world do not have adequate access to safe drinking water. And that 1 billion figure is a bit misleading, because all that means is that there are 1 billion people who cannot walk half a mile from their home to reach an improved source of water. It does not count in its number all of the people who still do not have networked water coming to their homes. If you look at all of the people who actually have to walk out of their homes a great distance in order to get water every day, it is actually about 3 times the 800,000 figure that you heard earlier. And not only do we need water in order to survive, we also need water in order to carry out virtually any business. And in particular, we would not be able to feed the world's population today if it was not for irrigation of crops around the world, which increases the yield to the extent necessary to provide the food that is on our tables and hopefully the tables of every individual around the world. So what I want to focus on today is how can we actually meet the needs of the world's population for water, but do it on a more sustainable basis than we have in the past. And to start this, I want to start locally. I want to start with an LA story. I want to start with a story that my maternal grandfather told me when I was just 5 years old. It's a story about 2 rivers. The first river is the river that you see here, the LA River. And my grandfather assured me that at one point in time, the LA River was actually a river. It was not a storm drain, it was a river. And in fact, William Mulholland, who was the superintendent at one point of the LA Department of Water, described the LA River as a lovely, limpid river with willows along its banks. And although, as you can tell from this particular picture, except during the winter when it flooded, the LA River was not a particularly large river. For over the first century of LA's history, the LA River supplied us with the water that we needed. In fact, in the middle of the 19th century, the LA River permitted Los Angeles to become the wine capital of North America. There were so many Frenchmen who were attracted to Los Angeles because of the water of the LA River and the vineyards here, that when California became a state in 1850, 1 out of every 5 Angelenos was French. And downtown had what was known as Frenchtown, where all of them lived. But although the LA River satisfied our needs for the first century, by the turn of the 20th century, LA had sucked the LA River dry in order to meet our growing needs. Not only had it sucked all of the water out of the LA River, but it also had begun to overdraft the groundwater aquifers which fed the LA River. So Los Angeles began to look for an alternative source of water. And after looking at a variety of potential locations, what they decided was that a perfect source of water for Los Angeles was the Owens River. In the Owens Valley, which is on the eastern side of the Sierra Mountains, the Owens River carried about 15 times the amount of water that the LA River carried in a normal year. And LA realized that they could actually bring the water of the Owens River down to Los Angeles by a gravity-fed aqueduct so that they would not have to pump water to the city of Los Angeles. Los Angeles had only one problem, and that was that virtually all of the water of the Owens River had been previously appropriated by farmers and ranchers in the Owens Valley. And one of those farmers was my maternal grandfather. You can see in this particular picture my mother down in the lower right-hand corner with the dog and smiling for the camera. My maternal grandfather has his head turned to one of his sons. He loved his farm. The city of Los Angeles came and actually offered to buy his farm for the water resources that were attached to that farm. And my grandfather turned them down because he felt that the Owens Valley should remain a vibrant community of agriculture. However, my grandfather had also become tired of farming. And so after turning down the city of Los Angeles's offer, he sold his farm to a neighbor. That neighbor turned out to be a front for the city of Los Angeles. So the city of Los Angeles actually got his farm, it got his water, but my grandfather took the money that he had received from the farmer, and he moved to Los Angeles and was one of many citizens who actually went out and saw the water from the Owens Valley flowing down through the Los Angeles aqueduct into the San Fernando Valley. My grandfather, though, was even smarter than moving to Los Angeles. He moved to Los Angeles, he took his money, he invested the money in land in the San Fernando Valley, and then utilizing the water that the city of Los Angeles was importing down from the Owens Valley, he began to subdivide property in the San Fernando Valley. Over time, he and hundreds, if not thousands, of subdividers similar to him changed what was at one point a largely desert environment into the San Fernando Valley that we know today. A community which is home to almost 1.8 million people and a vibrant economy. Personally, I consider this to be a success story. This is a story of how Los Angeles and the Los Angeles region was able to meet its water needs and to continue to grow in terms of both population and an economy by bringing additional water to Los Angeles. But unfortunately, this particular success story also had significant costs. One of those costs was to the farmers of the Owens Valley, to people like my grandfather, who was uprooted from their community and forced to move elsewhere. This is a cartoon from the Owens Valley Tribune that, as you can see, shows the Los Angeles Water Board as a vulture, simply waiting to be able to take the water away from the farmers in the region. But there was a cost not only to the local population, there was also a significant environmental cost, and that was to Owens Lake. The Owens River used to flow into Owens Lake, very close to where my grandfather's farm was. And Owens Lake was one of the largest lakes in the state of California. It was about half the size of the entire San Fernando Valley. But because of all of the water that Los Angeles drew out of the Owens River, today the Owens River is largely one large salt flat. Whereas Joseph Grinnell, who was the first head of the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology at UC Berkeley, said when he visited this site when it was still a lake, there must be literally thousands of birds within sight of this one spot. Today, that spot is largely sand. So the question for me is there a way of duplicating the success that Los Angeles had in being able to continue to grow both its population and its economy, and do that on a sustainable basis? And this is not simply a problem in Los Angeles. This is a problem that is being duplicated at multiple scales. So it's also being duplicated at the state level. This particular map shows all of the aqueducts and pipelines that move water back and forth over the California geography in order to make sure that where we want to live and where we can grow crops has water. And that requires finding the water and then moving it to those particular areas. But this radical change in the hydro map of the state of California again comes at a severe cost, including to the environment. So Peter Moyle, who's a biologist at the University of California at Davis, has at a number of times surveyed the status and the health of native fish species in the state of California. And what he found was that in 1975, over 60% of our native fish species had stable populations. They were healthy. By 1989, that had dropped to approximately a third of our native species. By 1995, it had actually dropped further, and by the year 2010, only about 14% of our native fish species are relatively stable. And that's largely because we are diverting water from our rivers and streams for use throughout the state, and we are building dams and reservoirs which block the migration of those fish species. And this is, again, not occurring simply at the California level, but this is also occurring at the global level. So this particular chart shows the total amount of water storage in reservoirs globally. And what you'll see here is that if you go to approximately 1950, we had built enough dams and reservoirs in the world to hold about 500 cubic kilometers of water. That's about 30 Lake Meads, if you want to get sort of a general sense of what that is. But as you can see, beginning in 1950, we went on a dam building spree around the world in order to be able to collect the water and store the water that we would then need during dry periods in various areas around the world. And just as Los Angeles's water imports ended up harming the local environment, similarly with California State's efforts as a whole, this has also been true at a global level. So this particular chart shows the status of various types of species globally. And what you'll see is that all species are on the decline, largely because we're destroying their habitat, also because of climate change. But the species that are most at risk are these freshwater species. And again, that's because we are actually being highly successful in moving water around from where it is to where we need it. So again, the question is, can we have the success without the harm? Can we have the success on a sustainable basis? And one of the things I really like about the Pacific Council's conference today is that it is focused on solutions. And one of the things that I hope we do today is spend as much time as we possibly can thinking about what these solutions are. And I would suggest the solutions fall into three categories: natural infrastructure, economic incentives, and new technologies. So first of all, on the natural infrastructure. Nature has endowed us with a great deal of natural capital or natural infrastructure that we can use to provide us with as much water as we actually need. We are used to building dams, reservoirs, pipelines, but we can also use natural infrastructure. So let me give you an example. This is Lake Mead. Our traditional approach to storing water is to build a dam and then store the water in back of that particular dam. It's expensive, it's environmentally damaging. Another approach that California is actually taking the lead on is the idea of storing that water underground. So what you do is you take a recharge basin, you put water in there when it's available, that percolates down into that groundwater aquifer, which actually has a great deal of storage space, and then you can pump it out during dry periods when you need that water. If you take all of the storage capacity in California today, all of the storage capacity that we've built behind reservoirs, behind dams, there's at least 15 times that amount of storage capacity in our underground aquifers. And again, California is leading the way here. This is the Kern Water Bank, which is the largest water bank on the West Coast. And one of the things I think Ashley Bourne is going to talk about later is, could we do this on a distributed basis, where we could get individual farmers like this farmer, that when water is available, to spread the water over their land and let it then percolate down into storage underground. Another approach is economic incentives. Economic incentives are incredibly important. If we want to encourage conservation, the best way of encouraging conservation is pricing water correctly. But one of the things that one of the panels will deal with this afternoon or this morning are water markets. Water markets at one point were banned in the Western United States. And in California, if you go before about the year 1980, we had virtually no water marketing in California. But as you can see from this particular chart, beginning in 1982, We've grown our water market significantly where people can buy and sell water. And this has a variety of advantages, but just to show one of the advantages, imagine that you are the owner of this nut farm up in the upper portion of this particular slide. It's a drought. You need water to water these trees. These trees are your capital. You need water or your capital is going to disappear. Without water markets, you might not have adequate water to do that. But with water markets, if you don't have adequate water, you can go to somebody and you can purchase that water for use on your farm. And in fact, economists have found that as a result of water markets, we save about $100 million during years of drought by permitting people to move water around from where people can save it to where it is needed. And not only can water markets help the economy, they can also help wildlife because there's a growing number of water trusts, like the Delta Water Trust, that now buy water from people and put it back in the rivers for fish and wildlife. The final thing that we need to pay attention to is new technologies. Desalination is one form of new technology that we should be focused on. But the one I'm most interested in is water reclamation, where we take the water that we've already utilized and we recycle and we reclaim it. This is the Donald Tillman Water Reclamation Plant in Los Angeles, which is providing reclaimed water to portions of the San Fernando Valley. In California as a whole, we recycle about 13% of our water. That's actually very high for the world as a whole, but this is still very expensive. It requires a great deal of energy. The greatest energy user in virtually every city are the water reclamation plants. And so there are opportunities for new technologies. This is the Cotega Resource Recovery Center. This gentleman is Sebastian Tillmans. And this is a new facility at Stanford University that we are testing, and we believe that we will be able to generate more electricity by taking the embedded energy in that wastewater and basically burning the gases for energy. We will be able to generate more energy than we utilize, bringing down substantially the cost of water recycling. The problem, and I'll just leave you with this slide, is that if you look at new patents being issued, the top line here shows new patents in energy, the bottom line shows new patents in water. Energy patents have taken off because we are devoting significant sums to figuring out new energy technologies. Water patents have not. We need to figure out how to take the new technologies that we develop so well in the energy field. We need to duplicate that particular effort in the water field. So finally, I'll just leave you with this slide. This is a slide of when we had a pulse flow in the Colorado River and actually returned water to the Colorado River for the first time in over 30 years. People in Baja California came out and celebrated because water is not simply needed for life, it's not simply needed for the economy, it's also needed for culture. So thank you very much.